The most mysterious geological wonders on Earth. What if some of Earth's strangest landscapes were so precise that they looked engineered rather than formed by nature? Across the planet, mineral-covered geysers erupt from barren ground, blue and white caves twist above turquoise water, and enormous rocks rise from open plains, with deep grooves running across their surfaces like marks left by giant machines. These formations are real, but many of their shapes and origins still raise questions. They stand completely apart from the landscapes around them, appearing too perfect, too unusual, and sometimes too impossible to explain. Today, we explore the most mysterious geological wonders on Earth, places where nature has created formations that still seem beyond belief. In the arid plains of New Mexico, shiprock rises abruptly with sharp peaks, vertical rock faces, and countless deep grooves running across its surface. From the base of the mountain, a band of black volcanic rock stretches across the desert, following the terrain before disappearing toward the horizon. At the end of this line, shiprock stands as the focal point of the entire region. As you move closer, the rock walls become even more massive. They are covered with cracks and narrow columns, while the summit is divided into several sharp points. At times, the mountain's reflection appears in pools of water across the dry ground, making the landscape feel even more mysterious. It is actually the hardened remains of molten material left behind by an ancient volcano that was eroded away. However, its original structure and the process that formed the long rock ridges still cannot be fully reconstructed. Marble Caves, Chile. Carrera Lake in southern Chile, white and gray marble formations stand out against the turquoise water. In the distance, forested slopes and mountain peaks stretch along the horizon. The bases of the marble formations have been hollowed into a series of curved arches with openings and deep cavities positioned directly above the lake. Along the shore, large rocks are scattered around, creating small pools of clear water between the cracks. Visitors usually explore the area by kayaking along the walls, passing through low entrances and moving deeper into the dark tunnels inside. The farther they go, the more the white, gray, and blue veins curve across the ceiling and extend downward into sharp patterns that make the marble look as if it is melting. Waves have eroded the caves for thousands of years, but it is the light reflecting off the water that causes the patterns to constantly change color, turning the rock chambers into a completely surreal space. Limestone pinnacles. Madagascar. The ground nearly disappears beneath a forest of thousands of gray limestone blades. Pinnacles are packed tightly together, forming towering walls and dark vertical crevices where sunlight can barely reach the bottom. From above, the entire surface looks like a maze divided by countless narrow gaps. Trees can only grow inside the few cavities and open spaces available. To travel deeper inside, visitors must use safety ropes to climb across vertical rock faces, squeeze between narrow walls, cross suspension bridges, and then descend into dark chambers beneath the ground. This landscape was created as water seeped through fractures and dissolved the limestone over a long period of time. However, beneath this forest of sharp rock, many deep cavities, underground passages, and routes have still not been fully explored. Stone spheres, New Zealand. In New Zealand, dozens of stone spheres are scattered near the water's edge, forming a curved line that stretches along the sand. When the tide rises, seawater surrounds their bases, making them look like black spheres floating on the ocean. Only when the tide recedes is their full size, revealed from small moss-covered stones to large formations nearly as tall as a person. Across their surfaces is a network of polygonal cracks, sometimes filled with yellow-orange mineral lines. Some have broken into several pieces, exposing the solid cores inside. Others have been deeply eroded, leaving behind circular stone rings that hold water along the beach. Boulders formed when minerals accumulated around a core buried within the mud of an ancient seabed. However, their nearly perfect shapes and different fracture patterns still make them look more like deliberately placed objects than products of nature. Arches National Park, USA. Arches National Park, USA. A gap in the cliff face can widen into a window further away. The entire middle section of a sandstone block has disappeared, leaving only a thin band of rock connecting the two walls. Throughout Arches National Park, arches appear among stone towers, narrow ridges, and rock blocks, balancing on much smaller bases. Some arches sit close to the ground, while other structures open up high above, framing the entire sky behind them. As you walk along the roads in the park, the shape of each arch constantly changes. Sometimes they look like round holes piercing right through the wall. Just a few steps later, the rock on top becomes so thin that it seems like it could collapse at any moment. Water temperature and the weathering process have expanded the cracks in the sandstone layers, creating over 2,000 recorded arches. Continuing to transform, meaning the structures that appear today could collapse, while other rock crevices are quietly widening into new arches. Devil's Tower, USA. In the middle of the Wyoming grasslands, hundreds of vertical stone columns are packed tightly together, forming one massive block. Devil's Tower has a nearly flat top, while grooves run continuously from the top down to the base. Around the bottom are pine forests and steep slopes covered in rock fragments that have broken off from the face. As you follow the path around the base of the tower, your perspective constantly changes. Sometimes the rock columns appear straight and even like a wall. On the other side, they are divided by crevices, protruding blocks, and patches of rock flaking off the surface. The Devil's Tower is made of magma that cooled and shrank into polygonal columns. Yet exactly what structure this magma once formed underground has still not been fully determined. Giant rock formation, Sri Lanka. In Sri Lanka, a giant rock formation rises out of the Sri Lankan forest canopy with almost vertical cliff faces and a top cut across into a wide plateau. Surrounding the base of the rock are pools of water, straight pathways, and gardens divided into geometric layers, making the mountain block stand out even more amidst the green plains. To get higher, you have to pass through stairs clinging to the cliff, wrap around rock hollows, and then continue climbing between two giant lion paws. The closer to the top, the more the forest canopy below shrinks, while reddish-brown cliffs open up right next to the walkway. On the top surface are foundation stones, steps, and reservoirs sitting close to the edge of the cliff. The rock is the remains of an ancient geological structure that resisted the erosion around it. Fly Geyser, USA. At Fly, Geyser in Nevada, hot water erupts continuously from 3 rock cones covered in red, green, and yellow, then spills down mineral terraces amidst the dry land. Small pools connect to each other by curved orange and white rims. Steam drifts close to the surface, obscuring parts of the rock formation before the wind pulls it out of frame. When you look closer, the outer layer of the cones is not flat at all. Water flows through countless small grooves, pools in shallow hollows, and then continues to spread down to the surrounding wetlands. The area appeared after a well drilling operation tapped into a geothermal source. Minerals in the water gradually built up into cones and stone terraces, while thermophilic microorganisms created the striking patches of color. The flow of water continues to bring materials to the surface. The shape of Fly Geyser has never been truly fixed. Spotted Lake, Canada. In the summer, the water level at Spotted Lake drops and reveals hundreds of circles lying close together, like separate cells on the same lake surface. Some circles are blue, while others turn green or pale yellow. Between them are white mineral strips forming outlines, dividing the entire lake bed into an unusual network. From the roadside observation point, these spots of color spread out at the foot of the dry hills of British Columbia toward the end of the hot season. The water in each cell shrinks further, while the crystallized layer around the edges becomes clearer. This phenomenon occurs when water evaporates, leaving behind high concentrations of various salts and minerals. Different compositions give each small pool its own color and shape. When the water returns, most of the circles sink back down. The strangeness of Spotted Lake is only most apparent at the time when the lake's surface has almost disappeared. White rock formations, Western Egypt. Amidst the pale yellow sand of Western Egypt, white rock formations appear scattered like objects abandoned on a completely empty surface. Some formations stand as tall columns with bulging tops. Others are hollowed out deep at the base, creating stone arches, giant mushrooms, and shapes that change with every viewing angle. Interspersed among them are low rock patches, stretching close to the ground, blanketing the desert in an almost continuous white color. As vehicles move deeper into the area, the rock clusters gradually separate from the horizon and then suddenly appear right next to the path. By the time the sun gets low, their shadows stretch across the sand, making the exact same rock look completely different in just a matter of minutes. Most of the landscape is made of chalk and soft limestone, which was then eroded by wind and sand over a long period. No two structures share the same shape, which is why the entire desert looks like an area still being sculpted by the wind. Stone forest, Niger, Algeria. In Niger, Algeria, narrow pathways open up between tall sandstone walls, then abruptly lead into a clearing filled with stone columns, arches, and fragmented mountain blocks. Nadia spreads across the edge of the Sahara like a stone city that has lost its roof. Dark brown cliffs crowd close together, while deep crevices run through the surface and divide the plateau into countless isolated areas. In some places, the sandstone is hollowed out into openings large enough to look through to the valley behind. Further on, thin rock blocks balance on narrow bases surrounded by sand and small bushes, growing in wind-sheltered hollows. Water and wind have eroded the sandstone layers into a landscape, often described as a stone forest. The deeper you go into this system, the more the horizon is obscured, to the point where it is very hard to tell just how far the stone maze actually extends. Racetrack Playa, USA. In the USA, on a dry lake bed surface so flat that it is almost featureless, solitary rocks sit with long grooves trailing behind them. Some tracks run almost perfectly straight. Others change directions, suddenly intersect, or curve across the dry mud that has cracked into thousands of polygonal patches. The strange thing is that around the rocks, there are absolutely no footprints or tire tracks. As you walk along the surface of Racetrack Playa, each groove appears as proof that the rock once slid across here. However, that movement rarely happens right when someone is watching. The phenomenon is explained by a thin layer of ice forming around the rocks, which then breaks into large sheets and is pushed by the wind across the wet surface. By the time the water evaporates and the mud dries again, all movement vanishes, leaving only the path of each rock preserved on the ground. Danzig Mountain Scenic Area. Located in Renoir County, Chaguanas City, the Danzig Mountain Scenic Area stands out with towering red-orange rock formations rising above the green forest, creating a landscape that feels both majestic and unusual. The terrain is divided into numerous stone towers, narrow ridges, and deep ravines extending across the entire area. Layers of rock are stacked in clearly visible bands. In some places, they rise almost vertically, while elsewhere, they are separated into individual columns connected by thin slopes. What makes the mountain especially famous are two natural rock formations shaped like male and female genitalia. These forms were created entirely through natural weathering, making the area one of the region's most curious and popular tourist attractions. Stone chimneys, Turkey. In Turkey, When hot air balloons start to rise in the early morning, thousands of cone-shaped stone columns are gradually revealed beneath the mist, blanketing the valleys of Cappadocia. Many columns have narrow beige bodies and a dark rock block sitting on top. They stand in clusters on the slopes, nestled between curving ridges, dry ravines, and stone walls that have been hollowed out into windows and entrances. Close to the ground, the stone columns obscure each other and create many narrow paths. But as the view gets higher, the entire valley opens up, revealing successive layers of terrain reaching all the way to the distant mountains. Layers of soft volcanic material have eroded away, while the harder rock on top protects the columns underneath. Over time, the bases continue to thin out. Some chimneys therefore collapse, while new shapes are still gradually emerging on other mountain slopes. Isolated clay pan, Namibia. In Namibia, black tree trunks stand motionless on the cracked white ground. They are backed by red sand dunes so high they almost block out the horizon. The site is located in an isolated clay pan in the middle of the Namibia Desert. On the flat surface, camel thorn trees that dried up long ago grow far apart, leaving bare branches reaching up under the harsh sunlight. When you walk deep into the pan, the colors in the frame are separated into distinct layers. White clay lies underfoot, dark tree trunks stand in the middle, and sand slopes shifting from orange to red in the back. There is no shade, running water, or vegetation to break up that composition. This place used to receive water from the Saw River, but sand dunes gradually blocked the flow, causing the pan to dry up completely. The climate is so extreme that the tree trunks do not decompose, preserving them as traces of a landscape that vanished centuries ago. Hongshan Stone Forest, Xinjiang. In the stone forest, red rock layers are compressed into thin ridges, standing close together and stretching into a zigzagging corridor amidst the dry land of Xinjiang. The Hongshan stone forest does not have isolated stone columns like a typical forest. The whole area is made up of slanted walls, sharp peaks, and countless deep grooves running parallel across the surface. From above, the reddish-brown rock bands fold into successive layers divided by light-colored, dry crevices. When the line of sight lowers, those lines turn into sheer walls, narrow walkways, and rock formations whose shapes constantly change depending on the direction of movement. The characteristic color comes from sedimentary layers containing high amounts of iron compounds, which were then uplifted and eroded into their current structure. Standing among the rock ridges, it is very hard to tell where an individual block is, as the entire landscape seems to be folded out of the exact same dark red material. Uluru, Australia. Across the flat plains in central Australia, Uluru rarely leaves your sight. Even when the distance to the rock is still very far, its surface is not as smooth as it looks from the horizon. When you get closer, long grooves, deep hollows, and peeling patches of rock begin to appear, dividing the cliff face into many sections of different shapes. The light makes Uluru constantly change color in the morning. The rock takes on a pale orange hue, while by the end of the day, the face facing the sun turns deep red, while the deep crevices quickly fade into darkness. Uluru is the exposed portion of a massive sandstone block that has been tilted and eroded over a long period. The vast majority of its structure continues to lie deep underground. It is this disparity between the visible part and the buried rock underneath that makes Uluru look like the tip of a much larger structure hidden beneath the plains. Volcanic crater lakes, Indonesia. In Indonesia, only a narrow rock ridge separates two volcanic craters with completely contrasting colors. One is deep blue, the other is pale turquoise, while a third dark lake sits apart between forest-covered slopes. This is a mysterious geological wonder on Flores Island in East Nusa Tenggara Province, Indonesia. Clouds sweep across the summit, and the lakes appear clearly one moment and disappear behind thick fog the next. Visitors must follow trails and stairways through the clouds to reach the observation deck, where the three volcanic craters open directly below. The water changes color because of minerals, volcanic gases, and hydrothermal activity beneath the surface. Even though all three lakes exist on the same mountain, each one changes according to its own rhythm. Mount Shangqing. Clouds roll through the valleys of Mount Shangqing, revealing only the tops of the granite columns rising out of the forest below. When the mist parts, the sheer cliffs, narrow ridges, and a series of sharp peaks gradually reconnect into one extensive system. Pine trees cling to tiny crevices on the rock face, with many trunks growing at an angle out over the empty space right on the edge of the abyss. The walkways skirting around the mountainside are often level with the clouds. From here, a rock block might appear as a straight column when viewed head-on, then turn into a thin blade of stone as you move to the other side. The landscape was formed from granite, which was then divided by cracks, weathering, and erosion into columns and mountain peaks with complex shapes. The weather changes so quickly that Mount Shangqing rarely appears in its entirety. Every time the clouds part, a different section of the stone forest is revealed, and then quickly vanishes. Goblin Valley, USA. At Goblin Valley in the USA, as soon as the road dips into the valley, the ground ahead is almost entirely covered by thousands of sandstone blocks with large heads and short stone bodies. They stand in clusters on the orange ground, interspersed among low mounds, dry grooves, and formless pathways. Some blocks look like a mushroom. Others lean to the side, line up in rows, or stack on top of each other like creatures gathering in the desert. You can walk straight down into the valley and weave between the stone columns, where most of the horizon is obscured. Only when the viewpoint is raised does the entirety of Goblin Valley emerge as a field of stone, stretching toward the distant cliffs. These structures formed when sandstone layers of varying hardness were eroded unevenly by water and weather. Every block has its own distinct contours, As a result, the landscape constantly changes. If you move just a few steps within the same cluster of rocks, Kjeragbolten, Norway. In Norway, an almost perfectly round boulder sits wedged between two cliffs, with an open void dropping straight down to the lesser fjord below. The formation only truly reveals itself after a journey across the rocky plateau of Chirag. The trail continuously crosses over slick granite slopes, dips down into small valleys, and then climbs back up to ridges. Sitting nearly a kilometer above the water, at the final crevice, the two walls separate just enough to hold the boulder in the middle. From a head-on angle, it seems to fill the gap entirely. But when the viewpoint shifts to the side, the bottom is completely detached from the rock face, and the entire fjord comes into view deep down below. The boulder is believed to be glacial deposit material that then got stuck in the crevice as the ice retreated from the area. With only two tiny points of contact on either side, Kjeragbolten looks like it is suspended in mid-air, even though it has rested quietly between the mountains for a very long time.